Hello, and welcome to Boring Stories for Sleep tonight. We travel to the cold, windswept edge of the world, to a lonely rock set against the vast expanse of the North Atlantic. Our story is centered on a lighthouse, a structure built as a beacon of certainty, a steadfast guardian against the fury of the sea. Lighthouses are symbols of vigilance and endurance, their keepers the quiet sentinels of the coast. It is here that three men, tasked with keeping the light, disappeared without a trace, leaving behind a riddle that has echoed through maritime lore for over 100 years. But what happens when the keepers themselves fall silent? What happens when the guardians vanish, and the light that promises safety becomes the heart of a deep and unsettling mystery? Let your body grow heavy, and your mind begin to quiet. There is no need to hold on to every word. Simply let the rhythm of the story, like the gentle swell of a calm sea, carry you toward a state of peaceful rest. Let us begin. In late December of 1900, that ship was the steamer Hesperus. It made its way through the choppy, grey waters, carrying supplies, letters, and a relief keeper, Joseph Moore. No one appeared on the landing stage to prepare for their arrival. The keepers should have been there, waiting to secure the lines and receive their provisions. The island was silent. Captain Harvey ordered the ship's horn to be sounded, a loud blast that echoed of the cliffs. But there was no response. The lighthouse stood impassive, its windows like vacant eyes staring out at the sea. The arrival of the Hesperus was a significant event, a welcome break in the monotony. Our journey takes us to the Flannan Isles, a remote and uninhabited cluster of islands of the coast of Scotland, at the very dawn of the 20th century. The first sign was small, but significant. The flagpole at the lighthouse was bare. A flag should have been raised to greet the ship, as was protocol. It was a minor breach of a rigid routine, but a breach nonetheless. The relief ship, a symbol of connection to the outside world, was met only with a profound and unnerving quiet. The mystery had begun. So now, I invite you to find a comfortable position. To understand the mystery of the Flannan Isles, you must first imagine the place itself. Picture a collection of small, rugged islands, little more than rocky outcrops lashed by the constant winds and waves of the North Atlantic. And on the highest point of the largest island, eerily, stood the Flannan Isles Lighthouse. It was a proud, solid tower of stone, a marvel of engineering designed to withstand the worst the ocean could offer. For the men who worked there, it was their entire world. They are beautiful, in a harsh and unforgiving way. There are no trees, only windswept grass, sheer cliffs, and the constant, lonely cry of gannets and gulls. At the turn of the 20th century, this was a place of profound isolation. The rhythm of their lives was one of meticulous, unvarying routine. We introduced the three men stationed there in December of 1900. Thomas Marshall, the principal keeper, James Ducat, the first assistant, and Donald Macarthur, the second assistant. Their existence was a cycle of duties, polishing the great brass mechanisms of the lamp, trimming the wicks, winding the clockwork that made the light revolve. They recorded the weather with painstaking detail in a logbook, kept the living quarter spotless, and spent countless hours simply watching, waiting. It was a life of solitude that required immense psychological fortitude. Every few weeks, their isolation would be broken by the arrival of a relief ship, their only link to the mainland and the world beyond their rock. But as the ship approached eerily on December 26th, Captain James Harvey noticed that something was wrong. As they drew closer, a deeper sense of unease began to set in. The men who were meant to be a beacon of safety for others were themselves unaccounted for. Aboard the Hesperus, the mood was one of growing apprehension. The silent, unresponsive lighthouse stood like a stone sentinel on the cliff, offering no explanation. The sea was rough, and the churning waters around the island made an immediate landing impossible. For hours, the ship could only wait, circling the island, while the crew's unease deepened with every passing moment. Finally, a break in the weather allowed them to launch a small boat. The man chosen to go ashore was Joseph Moore, the relief keeper. He went to the small vestibule where the keepers hung their heavy outdoor gear, and it was here that he found the most baffling clue of all. The rules of the Northern Lighthouse Board were absolute and drilled into every keeper. The most important rule was that the lighthouse was never to be left unmanned. Under no circumstances were all three keepers to leave the tower at the same time. For two experienced keepers like Marshall and Ducat to venture outside into the fierce Atlantic weather without their protective oilskins was simply unthinkable. It defied all logic, all training, and all sense of self-preservation. Hanging on their hooks were two sets of oilskin coats and sea boots. Marshall wrote that James Ducat, his normally stoic and composed assistant, had been very quiet. And then, a truly shocking observation, Donald Macarthur, a tough, seasoned mariner, a man chosen for his resilience against the solitude and the sea, has been crying, but the two sets of oilskins hanging on their hooks suggested an event so sudden, or so strange, that it caused seasoned professionals to abandon the most fundamental rules of their existence. The wind howling outside, so loud it feels like a physical presence. Marshall wrote that the storm was still raging, and that all three men had been praying. It spoke of deep psychological distress, followed by a sudden return to calm. The physical evidence outside spoke of a very real and tremendously powerful wave that had struck the island with incredible force. The men were clearly terrified of something. They survived it, and then, in the calm that followed, they disappeared. The mystery was no longer just what had happened to the men, but what had happened on their lonely rock in the days leading up to their disappearance. For three professional keepers to be so shaken as to be reduced to prayer and tears suggested a level of fear that went beyond the normal hazards of their job. And inside, one man is withdrawn and silent, while another, a veteran of the sea, is weeping. The entry speaks of a profound terror that had gripped the men. The storm, whether real or psychological, was over, and here there was clear evidence that some immense force of nature had indeed struck Lighthouse. On the western landing platform, a place that stood more than 150 feet above sea level and was normally the more sheltered of the two landings, the damage was significant. A heavy supply crate, which had been filled with ropes, tools, and other equipment, had been smashed open, its contents strewn about. Iron railings that ran along the cliffside path were bent and twisted out of shape. A large block of stone, weighing over a ton, had been dislodged. The men had endured, and a sense of peace had apparently returned to the lighthouse. And yet, sometime after these words were written, all three men vanished. The logbook, instead of providing answers, left a silent, gaping void between the last words written and the discovery of the empty tower. He knew these belonged to the principal keeper, Thomas Marshall, and the first assistant, James Ducat. The clues did not solve the mystery. They only deepened it, creating a riddle that seemed to have no rational answer. The tone shifted completely. It read simply, "Storm ended, sea calm. God is over all." This was meant to be a dispassionate record of weather, duties, and supplies. But the final entries painted a portrait of men under immense psychological strain. Only one set of oilskins was missing, those belonging to the second assistant, Donald Macarthur. It was his job to take the place of one of the men on the island. Severe winds, the entry noted, the likes of which I have never seen before in 20 years. This in itself was unusual. While the weather had been rough, no such hurricane-force storm had been reported by any other ships or shore stations in the region. It seemed to be a storm that existed only at Lighthouse. He let himself in and approached the main door of the tower. It was unlocked. He stepped inside, calling out the names of the men. His voice echoed in the stone entryway, but the only answer was silence. A silence that was deeper than mere quiet. It was the heavy silence of an empty place. Now, it seemed, his job was to find them. In the kitchen, a clock on the wall had stopped. The fireplace was cold, the ashes long since dead. On the table, there were plates and cutlery laid out, as if a meal had been prepared, but was left uneaten. And next to the table, one of the kitchen chairs was overturned, the only sign of any haste or disturbance in the otherwise neat and tidy room. Imagine his journey in that small boat, rowing through the cold spray towards the steep cliffs of Lighthouse. He was heading towards a place that should have been a beacon of welcome, but now felt like the heart of a mystery. He landed on the slippery western platform, the waves crashing below. The climb up to the lighthouse was a steep and winding path carved into the rock. With each step, the silence of the island seemed to press in on him. There was no sign of life, save for the seabirds that wheeled and cried overhead. Reaching the lighthouse compound, Moore found the entrance gate closed. The scene that greeted him was both mundane and deeply unsettling. He made his way to the living quarters. Moore continued his search, his sense of dread growing. The significance of this discovery was immense. The overturned chair suggested a moment of alarm. The stopped clock and the uneaten meal suggested a life interrupted. Joseph Moore stood alone in the silent tower, surrounded by the ordinary possessions of three men who had vanished in an extraordinary way. After the initial, chilling discoveries inside the lighthouse, Joseph Moore and the shore party from the Hesperus turned their attention to the one object that might provide a timeline, a narrative of the keeper's final days, The Lighthouse logbook. The slate log, where temporary notes were kept, contained entries written by the principal keeper, Thomas Marshall. They began on December 12, 1900. On that day, Marshall wrote of a severe storm, the likes of which he had never witnessed. But the entry continued, and the details became personal and deeply unsettling. Imagine the scene within that stone tower. The entry for December 13th continued in the same vein, and then came the final entry, dated December 15th. This entry is perhaps the most mystifying piece of the entire puzzle. The crisis, it seemed, had passed. The investigation then moved outside to assess the physical state of the island. The evidence was contradictory. The logbook spoke of a storm on days when no such storm was officially recorded. In the end, there was no dramatic confrontation, no final clue that solved the puzzle with absolute certainty. The men were gone. The only confrontation was for the investigators of the Northern Lighthouse Board, who had to piece together a plausible narrative from the strange and contradictory evidence left behind. The theory goes something like this. After the storm had passed on December 15th, the keepers would have gone outside to inspect the damage. They would have seen the wrecked supply crate on the western landing and the scattered equipment. Two of the men, likely Marshall and Ducat, made their way down the treacherous path to begin the work of securing the gear. The strangeness of the logbook entries, particularly the account of a grown man crying, has led to other theories. And, as with any great mystery of the sea, more fanciful tales have been whispered over the years of a giant sea serpent, or of ghosts that haunt the island. The official theory of the rogue wave remains the most probable, a chilling reminder that even in a calm sea, the ocean can produce sudden, deadly violence. The mystery endures because of the small, human details that defy easy explanation. The weeping keeper, the uneaten meal, the stopped clock. Here, in the quiet comfort of your room, you are safe from the storm. The vast, cold expanse of the North Atlantic is a distant thought. The only rhythm is that of your own slow, steady breathing. These stories are part of the folklore, the legends that grow in the spaces left by unanswered questions. The riddle of the three keepers who vanished has been given back to the ocean, which holds its secrets well. Let the mystery fade. Let the questions dissolve into the gentle darkness. All that is left is to rest. It has inspired poems and songs, a cautionary tale about the immense power of nature and the profound fragility of human life when pitted against it. It is a story about humanity's attempt to impose order, with its timetables and routines and steadfast stone towers, upon the untamable chaos of the sea. Could the intense isolation and the terror of the storm have caused one of the men to lose his mind? Did a fight break out, as suggested by the overturned chair, that ended with one man killing the other two before taking his own life? This would explain why they rushed out without their oilskins. Perhaps the danger did not seem immediate in the now calm weather. The official explanation, the one that remains the most widely accepted, is a testament to the awesome and unpredictable power of the sea. Then, out of the calm sea, a rogue wave, an immense wall of water far larger than the surrounding swells, rose up and crashed over the landing platform, sweeping both men into the churning Atlantic with irresistible force. It was a sudden, desperate emergency. The third man, Donald Macarthur, still wearing his oilskins, may have been on a higher point on the cliff. Seeing his companions taken by the sea, he would have rushed down to help, only to be caught by the same wave or a second one that followed. This sudden, desperate rush could explain the overturned chair back in the kitchen. In this view, the men were not taken by a storm, but by a single, monstrous wave born from the storm's aftermath. This theory accounts for most of the facts, the physical damage, the missing men, and the reason why two of them were not wearing their protective gear. But where facts end, speculation begins, and the Flannan Isles mystery has given rise to a century of it. Other theories, born from the anxieties of the era, suggested abduction by a foreign vessel, or that the men had stumbled upon some secret and been silenced. We will likely never know with absolute certainty what happened to Thomas Marshall, James Ducat, and Donald Macarthur. The Flannan Isles lighthouse disappearance has become one of the classic maritime legends, a story passed down through generations of sailors. But the wind and the waves of that lonely island are a world away from you now. The lighthouse on eerily is automated now, its lights still shining, but kept by machines. Sleep now.